Mark Toro knows you can't just build it and you want them to come. You're going to have to pull out the stops, too. He has firsthand experience on the subject, as you'll see in today's Executive Profiles.
A kid growing up in the town of Belvedere, New Jersey. Tell me about Belvedere, New Jersey.
Well, Belvedere is like the Mayberry of the Northeast. It's 2,500 people to this day. The 100 kids in my graduating class, 10 of us went to college. The rest were all 4-H and Future Farmers of America.
Right.
Very much an agricultural community, lots of cornfields and dairy farms.
Wow. But you went off to Rutgers.
I did.
And got a civil engineering degree, is that correct?
That's
so
right.
What attracted you to that?
Well, my father and grandfather were both in the construction business, and all through high school and college I'd work on my father's construction projects during spring break, Christmas break, and summer break. So I got a hands-on feel for what it was like to construct buildings and was intrigued by it.
So what happened after Rutgers?
My wife was at Rutgers at the time, my now wife. 35 years ago, we met, and she moved to Atlanta to study at Life University, and I followed her here.
So what was Atlanta like when you moved here?
I recall a billboard on I-75 that said, "Atlanta's a great city, come back when we're finished." And 35 years later, we're still building. It has been a tremendous, I guess, experience to grow up in the construction and real estate business in Atlanta, Georgia in the last 30 years. Growing from 1.8 million, I think the population was on the Darlington board when
Right.
I first moved here, to now almost 6 million or more than 6 million. It's been a juggernaut.
Right. So did it start off in construction? Talk about the transition from construction into the development end of things.
So I was first a junior estimator for a general contractor and then eventually a project manager. And I saw sitting across the table from me one day, a gentleman by the name of Bob Nelson was my original mentor in the business, who was a representative for the owner of the building that I was building. And I thought, you know, he's got shiny shoes and he drives a nice car. And he said to me one day, he said, you know, you need to go to work for an organization who can teach you how to do it right. And he kind of brokered a deal for me to go to work for a general contractor that was one of the blue chip builders in the business. And then eventually made the transition into his aspect of the business, which was managing construction for a real estate developer.
Talk about some of the other leadership things you learned along the way that helped build you to where you are now with North American.
Well, I think that the whole concept of leadership, that was something that I didn't quite understand when I first started. I thought it was all about management. And Dan Dupree, who was another one of my early mentors, who was a vice chairman of Cousins most recently, is now with PAC, was the first leader that I encountered. When we were at Newmark Development Company in my early career, he had a group of young people who would run through brick walls for him. And it was because of that level of engagement that he fostered in the organization that we excelled and we performed at such a high level.
What is it about the developing livable cities and a great urban core that's so important to you?
Going to Rutgers, a cheap date when I first met my wife was to get on the train in New Brunswick, go into the city, walk around, look at all the tall buildings and fantasize about what it would be like to live there.
Right.
Moved to Atlanta, Georgia in 1981, lived in East Cobb, raised my daughters there, still sort of yearned for an urban experience, and moved to Midtown about 7 years ago. At the same time, the preference of the consumer of real estate became more urban in nature. So it's not that the suburbs will ever die, but the fact that the pressure to urbanize American cities is now being seen nationwide, especially here in Atlanta. We happen to be in the right place at the right time.
Talk to me about Atlantic Station and what it took to make it the success it is today.
Well, Atlantic Station is one of the greatest positioned real estate plays ever. And when you think about pure geography, at the confluence of two rivers, I-85, I-75, Midtown is growing up, a city within a city, extraordinarily well positioned. At the same time, we were studying experiential retail and mixed use as the next generation of commercial real estate, and had Atlantic Station as our living lab. So we were able to deploy hospitality principles and service and valet and concierge and music and lighting and all the kinds of things that are now required of commercial real estate enterprises, in a product that was, at that time, the first of its type, a non-commodity mixed-use project.
So let's move on to Avalon for a second. Has it turned out the way you expected, better, or are there things you wanted to see that are still to come?
Well, Avalon has far exceeded everyone's expectations, especially our own. People now in North Fulton have adopted Avalon as their third place. We had the opportunity to engage the community like I don't know that any other venture, pure real estate venture had before.
What are the challenges you're going to be facing, and what do you think are the keys to success for Colony Square?
Well, the number one factor for success will be its location. Colony Square is located at Main and Main, Atlanta, Georgia. But the fact that we have the highest density intersection in the southeast at 14th and Peachtree, we have a built-in population. Midtown does not have a living room. There is not a third place, not like there is at Avalon. And what we're seeing at Avalon is that people are seeking community and they're finding it in this third place. That's what we seek to create at Colony Square.
Why have you made public transportation part of your platform for our city going forward?
That's a big reason why we acquired Colony Square, being a block from the MARTA Art Center station. I'm an avid MARTA writer and I'm an avid MARTA advocate. And I think that in order for us to survive as a city that's growing at the rate we are, we've got to extend MARTA regionally in every direction in order for us to compete with our peer cities in Dallas and Denver and elsewhere.
Earlier in the show, we mentioned that North American Properties will build affordable housing units on the Atlanta Beltline. They also plan to build 2 mixed-use projects with apartments, retail, and restaurants. Now, those projects will be on opposite sides of the new East Side Trail. Construction will take place on what's essentially now a brownfield. So Atlanta Beltline officials are working to temporarily route the trail around the area.